everybody. I am tired. Semester is over, I did it, beat calculus, and have a couple of weeks to handle the 17 other obligations I have to deal with before spring starts. So let's do another video, why not? I want to talk about something. I didn't really consider this when I made that last video on Mario, but I can be a lot more freeform in my content now. In the past, with how long it would take to make the brainstorms and whatnot, months upon months of writing and rewriting and editing, as soon as a project is finished, I was kind of just done with it. It's just the end of the story, no way am I going back to that because I've been spending way too long on it. But with stuff like this, these little slideshows, now I can just follow up on things. I don't know what that means in the long term, but it's a door that wasn't open before, and that excites me. Now, I do want to talk really quick, acknowledge sort of the limitations of this format, because with how little time I am now spending on making these things, inevitably the quality is going to drop. The ideas aren't going to be as fleshed out, I'm going to be making a lot of stupid mistakes, which honestly, I'm kind of down for. I'm sure a lot of people that make things can relate to this, but oftentimes, you get so focused on making something the best version of itself that it can be, that you kind of just end up not doing anything in the process. It's this weird sort of self-sabotage disguised as quality assurance. Makes you think you're doing better by raising a higher bar of standard for yourself, but in reality, you're kind of just making yourself not reach your own standards. It is far better to increase your own average than being the best. Easy example. In the last video, I had an idea for Mario to use a sort of boomerang projectile that you could then bounce off of for a sort of mobile platform. I still like that idea a lot, but a couple of things. For one, it's literally how Simon's side special works. Like, you can down air off of that and it's awesome. That is proof of concept and it just never crossed my mind. And for the other, based on the path I've taken through Mario games, I was originally exposed to the boomerang through Galaxy, which you can bounce off of it there, and based on that experience, I kind of just assumed, like, oh, that's awesome. That's probably how it works in everything, right? But no, it does not. That was very, very wrong. A lot of people in the comments said, like, hey, this should be Cappy. I do agree. Unfortunately, there is no longer any boomerang supremacy. I'm sorry if that breaks any hearts. But there was something else in that video I want to quickly talk about. Let's talk a bit about blindly ranting about something or blindly praising it. Because the internet... Whoa. Because the internet has a very bizarre relationship with this. It's both heavily discouraged, algorithms will actively push it away from you if you disagree with it, but also absolutely enabling because they will keep feeding it to you if it's something you agree with. And that sort of hatred of the algorithm, how it kind of locks us into echo chambers, has created a sort of overall disdain towards opinions that lack nuance. I don't think that's actually very healthy. Well, let me phrase that in a different way. I don't think it's healthy to have these opinions, these rants that lack nuance. But that's like, it's human. Sometimes you need that release to be overly positive or overly negative on something. Trying to drive that away out of a discussion is kind of taking a bit of humanity out of a discussion, and I don't like that. I think it only really becomes a problem when it's the only thing that you do. When it becomes like a brand. I'm bringing all this up to talk about something I call opinion accessibility. Because there are so many corners of the internet that are actively designed, that are branded around either being super positive about things or super negative about things. But as these creators kind of build up and build their brands around either being super critical things or trying to find the good stuff in things, it makes it so the only opinion that can really exist in those spaces is the ones that conform with that kind of environment. And you'll see people push back on that, being like, oh no, we accept everybody's opinions in this environment. But the way that they discuss things, like their vocabulary, their presentation style, it makes it so you can't really stand in opposition to them, because that kind of presentation style is locking out the ability to have a discussion. Any pushback on a den of positivity? Jesus! Any pushback on a den of possibility. Positivity. Any pushback on a den of positivity is going to feel vile by comparison, because you're bringing down the mood. And when people are tag teaming, ragging on something, being like, oh, this is such a piece of dog shit, that's so many steps away from like an equal playing field that it's too much work trying to bring things back to the middle and have a discussion. Now, the reason I'm going off on this tangent is because I want to make a pact with my audience. With this style of presentation, there is no way I'm going to be able to avoid getting emotional, starting to rant or blindly praise things, and I'm not going to try to prevent myself from doing that. That's just, I'm a human. We're all humans. But anytime I do that, I want to then follow up on it at some point in the future with something more constructive. And I want you all to hold me to that, okay? So let's talk about the fire flower. I went off on a whole ranting tangent about it in the last video, and I do still stand by my distaste for it. But I want to explore why that feeling is there. Where does this come from? What corrupted me in this way to feel such disdain for arguably the most famous video game power-up in general? And I want to springboard off of that to have a discussion about ways it could change to fix that feeling. Not to say if it should, just kind of wondering if it could. Wanted to bring up this comment from Timur Tabor in particular, talking about how it's kind of a symbol of the NES era game design, which is interesting. Sparked by curiosity, and it's the reason I'm making this video, because when you think about it, the fire flower is a weirdly, uniquely stagnant bit of video game design. I think across the entirety of the industry, for that matter. And I think that's interesting. So we're going to start with a story. I think whenever you're going to get negative about something, it's always important to explain why it is that you came to that conclusion. Why do you feel that way? So I'm not a Nintendo kid. I was raised on the PC. Talked about this before in the Dark Matter video, but really the only exposure to Nintendo I had in general was an N64 at my grandmother's house. Now, I only got to play Super Smash Bros. For a handful of games until my aunt took it away, but that was my initial exposure to Mario. And I thought he was lame as fuck. Because, I mean, think about it. You got all these characters here, like this elf-looking dude with a sword and shield, this massive mechanical armored power suit, you got Captain Falcon looking all badass over there. And there's just this little dude in overalls, tossing out these tumbleweed-looking projectiles. Not the best first impression, both from a design perspective and a gameplay perspective. You take that fireball, and then you go over to Samus, who just deletes you with the charge beam. There was no contest. Mario just felt kinda lame when I first met him. Many years later, when I did eventually get a Nintendo console and the GameCube, I got exposed to Sunshine. First Mario game. Absolutely adored it. It was charming, it was fun, janky as hell, but I loved that. No fire flower. So almost immediately, my vision of Mario has been kinda poisoned for how important the fire flower is to his identity. Now that would eventually get remedied with both Double Dash and Mario Galaxy 2, but both of those interpretations of the fire flower are so much cooler than what they are in the base games. You got that badass scatter shot in Double Dash, which feels so good to use, and then I already talked about Galaxy in the last video. Like, that game makes the fire flower feel so cool. Giving it that kind of supercharged theme with the time limit, it feels special, it feels impactful. Love that. And then I played my first 2D Mario game, which was New Super Mario Bros. For the Wii. And after the trajectory I kind of taken with this series, these games kind of just felt soulless. Which I know is a blasphemous thing to say with Super Mario World on the screen. But I couldn't care. What I had experienced from this franchise felt so full of life and personality, and then to open a gateway to the older games through what I would argue is definitely the most stagnant the franchise has ever been, it was bad. Didn't like it. Still really don't, honestly. And as such, to circle back around to the actual topic of the video, Fire Flower kind of always just felt antiquated to me. Saw a little glimpse of how it was trying to evolve, then it immediately snapped back into conformity. Right? I forgot I made this slide. I said this in a comment on the old video too, and I don't know if I fully agree with this looking back, but it made me chuckle enough I want to repeat it. The Fire Flower as a power-up for Mario kind of feels the same to me as Marth being the Fire Emblem Lord, the face of the Fire Emblem franchise. Like, I get it. It's the first one. It's got the legacy value there. But goddamn, does everything that came afterwards engage me so much more. Now I want to bring up a message that this commenter named BN sent me afterwards, because I think this is wonderfully thought out, and I think it's important when you're trying to be negative about something that you acknowledge the positives of the other side in the process. I'm gonna narrate this out in full. I personally love the Fire Flower, both in Mario games and in Smash. I never really saw the Fire Flower as this attempt at a fantasy of screen clearing, because I never really saw that as the point of the power-up. You brought up how Mario and Smash is supposed to have this feeling of platforming through these challenges in a capture-the-flag sort of way, which I agree with. I'd argue the point of the Fire Flower is to be used as something to clear what's in front of you so you can keep that momentum of platforming. I'm really glad it doesn't have more impact to it, because I think that would be too distracting for what the move is going for. This is also why I love the way it works in Smash. You brought up how the ladder combos represent Mario's platforming, and I think in that regard, the Fire Flower works really well with that connection. How Fire Flower is typically used in Smash is sort of as a projectile Mario can follow to start his ladder combos. The Fire Flower is something specifically used to clear the way to start those ladder combos. I feel like if they made it a literal screen-clearing move, it wouldn't really embody Mario gameplay because it would just ultimately pause Mario's gameplay rather than flowing with it. Wonderfully said, and you know what? I agree. I can see where you're coming from. These were pieces I was missing. You have now filled them in. I can see the appeal now. I unfortunately still don't like it though. I'm sorry, I truly am, but I don't like that what is widely considered Mario's de facto signature ability feels so outclassed by everything around it. When you compare it to other, NES-era characters, I'd argue you can see that evolution. You can see how these characters' abilities have evolved. Samus's beam gets upgrades. Link can do cool shit with his sword. Mario's still tossing fireballs, just like he used to. And that does give me this vibe of missed potential. You can compare that with how he uses his pyromancy and spin-offs, and you can see that, yeah, there's cool shit he could be doing with this. There's more to be explored here. And then in Smash's case, while I do agree and like that you can use the fireball in that way, it's unfortunately not the only way you can use it. I'm about to make this comparison. I'm not suggesting these are remotely comparable in severity, but it does kind of give me Sonic Speed vibes, where yeah, he is super fast. You can theoretically be a rushdown character with him, but you don't have to. That's like a 10 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. Mario's fireball is like a 4, but I still don't like how you can gimp with it, how you can zone with it, how you can delay combat. I'd just rather have something like that sort of boomerang/cappy movement where you have to toss the cap behind you to be able to follow it as it goes in the other direction. That sort of delayed setup would still serve the same function, while cutting out the more annoying uses the other fireball attributes have. Circling back to the overall discussion of the video, the fireball is the fascinating Everstone of the video game industry. And I want to ask the question, how could it change? How could it evolve? Is there any way Nintendo could take this cornerstone of the Mario franchise's design philosophy and expand it in some way? And here's the thing. I do think that Nintendo is aware of this because of how they treated the Fire Flower in the Mario movie. Because they do treat it with a lot of reverence, a lot of importance. The whole campfire scene where they're in the field of fire flowers, like, it's a genuinely beautiful scene. But fascinatingly, that's kind of where the focus is. It's not necessarily on how the fire flower functions, they just use it to light a campfire. It's almost more of a celebration of its importance in of itself. Then when you circle back around to it later, when Donkey Kong gets it, dude's tossing bob-ombs. They juice it up to give it the impact it deserves. They do actually show it working in the same way it does in the games. There's a little shot of Donkey Kong in the background. But Mario is the focus of that segment, not Donkey Kong. And I don't know, I just think that's interesting. I think Nintendo does realize there's a bit of a paradox here. That this power-up is so important, but it hasn't really evolved in a way that matches that importance. So, what could feasibly happen here? Because sure, I could start going off on how, oh, maybe Mario could go full-on, like, Iron Man, shooting fireballs out of his hands to maneuver around. That could be super cool. That's a different power-up. That's a super fire flower right there. Mario's inherent gameplay design is so simple that you can't go crazy like that. I do think the fire flower still needs to mesh with, like, baseline Mario. It still has to have a pretty simple functionality there, so you can't go too crazy with this. But I would also like it to, you know, have a reason, a purpose. I'm trying to think of a way to say this without sounding mean. And I don't think I can, so I'm just gonna say it. If someone was to tell me that the fire flower was their favorite Mario power-up, I don't want to laugh at them. So there's gotta be a niche somewhere, right? Something for the fire flower to do that no other power-up can. Now, I want to be upfront here. This is less a presentation of a finalized idea and more just kind of an exploration of a thought process. Because I'll spoil the end of this little presentation. I don't think there really is room for the fire flower to evolve. I think it's stuck. But let me walk you through the process of how I came to that conclusion. Because my first thought was, okay, this needs to be pretty simple. You can't change too many aspects of it, so what if you could simply charge up the fire flower? Make it a bit like Mega Man's Buster. That would allow it to have the exact same functionality it already has now, but if you hold that button down, maybe you can do something else with it. The initial idea I came up with was that, okay, maybe if Mario forms the fireball in his hand, he can then roll it like a bowling ball to knock out a bunch of enemies in front of him simultaneously. Problem is, though, that's just a green shell, or an enemy you've frozen with the ice flower. And I very rapidly realized that the whole problem with the fire flower here, that in pretty much every single direction it can evolve, Nintendo has just created another power-up instead of having the fire flower change. And with this process having gone on for so many years, I don't think this power-up ecosystem has any more niches the fire flower can evolve towards, because there's already something living in that niche. But I didn't want to give up there, so I thought, okay, maybe we focus on more of this sort of melee side of things. The kind of flow of how you clear out enemies in front of you while you're using the fire flower has always felt a little goofy to me. So I thought, okay, well maybe if you use the fire flower when you're right in front of an enemy, you can like punch through him with the fire, get a little boost to your momentum. That could be kind of cool. But that kind of runs into that whole issue with the inherent simplicity of how you control Mario. With how ingrained the power-up is into Mario's identity, I don't think it should change in any way that upsets the baseline momentum of Mario's movement. I had an idea for a bit that maybe if you hit an enemy with a fireball, it would kind of bounce up for a bit. You burned its butt, it's going to cartoonishly leap up before falling off the screen, and maybe you could bounce off that enemy as a platform. That'd be kind of cool. A little extra functionality that wouldn't really shift the fire flower's role, but that's just the bubble flower, and it's a worse version of it. Maybe it could stack. Like, if you get more fire flowers, it gets more functionality. Maybe you start throwing them in, like, a scatter shot. But that doesn't really change what it's doing, because you can still run with the baseline fire flower and do fine regardless. Maybe give it a fiery double jump? I don't know. That's something. No, that doesn't work, because that messes with actual level design. Maybe make it so you start building momentum. He starts lighting on fire and goes faster and faster and faster. But no, that gets back into that issue of upsetting Mario's momentum. That's too different from baseline Mario controls. I was out of ideas. From a gameplay standpoint, there's nowhere it can move where there either isn't already a power-up doing the same thing, or you're making it too different for the sake of it being different, just so it can change. But I did come up with one thing. If the Fire Flower is stuck in tradition, within Mario's legacy, what if that was wholeheartedly embraced as a sort of side challenge aspect of Mario levels? That if you can complete the whole level with just the Fire Flower, you get a little extra reward at the end. You unlock some concept art, or some bonus levels based on prior Mario games. It would still be the same thing. It would still feel a little outdated, outclassed by its contemporary power-ups. But now it would have a niche of being at the core of Mario. There's a reason to pick it up over something else. Because using it would allow you to celebrate Mario's history in a way that the other power-ups aren't designed to enable. I've been mulling this over for a while, and that's the best I've got. So I want to throw this hypothetical question out to you guys. There will probably be an influx of these sorts of videos that are less about me presenting an idea and more presenting a thought process that I'm kind of mulling over and seeing if other people can come up with something better. Because I'm curious if somebody can think of a way around this paradox. How do you evolve something if there's no room for it to evolve? Should you evolve it at all? And that's really it. I like this style of videos. I can just talk about whatever sparks my interest, and that excites me. So tune in next time, where I'm probably going to be talking about this show. Because it has consumed me, it has broken me, and I need some kind of creative outlet so I can stop listening to that French song on repeat for the last several weeks of my life. See you then.